doing that all day. I did win a blue ribbon in January at the North American Honeybee Expo. So I'm super excited about that. Thank you. If you didn't go to the Bee Expo, they do it every year. Next year it'll be in January again in Louisville. It is so fun. There's so many beekeepers there. It's a couple of days. Bobby was there. Tons of equipment on sale and just beekeepers talking, presentations. It's amazing, so I highly recommend it. My goal is to grow. I am super obsessed with bees. And if you want to reach me, that's my email and my phone number, and that's what I look like on Facebook. So hit me up. I don't know if this will play. I got into my hives yesterday, and that's just a little video of a bee. So, okay. All right, so I'm going to cover the Forsyth County Beekeepers' best management practices, and then if you have any questions during, feel free to raise your hand. So the first thing is that European honeybee colonies should be maintained in strong, healthy conditions. The stronger your hives are, the better they're going to be. The stronger the hive, the better they can get rid of small hive beetles, the better they can defend themselves. So the stronger and healthier that you keep your hive, the better it's going to be. Neighborhood beekeepers will minimize potential honeybee interaction with neighbors and confined pets. So basically, you want to keep your hives far enough away to where they're not going to run into your neighbors or their pets and things like that. You can't really control where your bees go, but you want to be mindful of your neighbors. You want to discourage your bees from swarming. We've talked a lot about that today. Just being mindful, checking your hives regularly, especially in the spring. If you start to see signs of swarming, queen cells, swarm cells, you either want to talk to a mentor or start splitting colonies, or you just want to be on top of that, because it was just, last year I thought I was on top of everything. I looked out the window, I was like, oh my God, my bees are literally swarming right now. And it was too late at that point, so I just stood there and watched the beauty, and then they were too high to get out of a tree. But you can control that by paying attention and being on top of it. You want to make sure that you have a nearby water source. I have a patio that's about 100 feet away from my hives, and there are pots that have rocks in them with water, and they love those things. So just different pots. People use a container with wine corks, just something where they have access to water. I also live across the street from the lake, so they also love our neighborhood swimming pool, so there's that. But you definitely want to make sure they have water, because they are thirsty little suckers. And obviously, this is just a general rule of life, but treat your neighbors with respect, and hopefully they treat you with respect. A lot of people in your neighborhood might be concerned about you keeping bees. A lot of HOAs don't even allow it, so you'd want to check with them before you did have hives. I didn't, but I still have hives. But a couple of my neighbors that I've seen at the pool, just don't really like the fact, and there's another club member in my neighborhood that has hives, but the more they start to understand about the bees and the more I tell them about the bees, they're like, oh, most people who don't know anything about bees, they just instinctively, and I do too, think that they just want to run and sting you, and that's really the last thing they want to do. We talked about a lot of this, just be mindful where your hives are, where they're flying out of the entrance. Make sure it's not on a sidewalk or where people or pets are. Consider your neighbors. Keep gentle bees. That's sometimes easier said than done. Most of the time, if your hives are healthy, if they're in a good location, if they're fed, if they're watered, if they have the resources they need, most of the time they'll stay pretty gentle. Sometimes they get hot. I've had a hot hive to where I really couldn't even walk out into my yard. It was just to the point where I'm doing something, watering, and they just come and sting me. At that point, I requeened. So I did kill the queen and requeened, and that hive turned itself around. But sometimes they'll get a little hot. And that's when you really want to be mindful of your neighbors and their pets and their kids. You're doing this right now. You're coming to a class, you're educating yourself, but you just want to be knowledgeable about bees and how to keep them. Again, keep your hives from swarming. This is a pot on my patio that just has some rocks and some mulch in it, and they love it. Like, this is all day, every day, just bees having water. So, bees can't swim.
Or is that just rainwater?
It's just rainwater, and it stays kind of wet. This is actually a pot where I forgot to drill a hole in the bottom, so it stays very moist. If I see it's really dry on top, I'll just put some water on it. It doesn't take a lot. They can't swim. They have to stand on something and get their tongue down in there. So it's not like you really want like a lot of just stagnant water. You want something for them to be able to stand on. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of damp. It's not even full, but they love it. You can put a safety barrier around your hives. As you saw, mine are pretty open. They are butted right up to the back of another person's property. They always fly forward. It's never been a problem, but if you want to add something extra, you could do that. It's best to inspect your hive if it's over 50 degrees on a sunny day where there's not a lot of wind. When I was a new beekeeper, I was in the hives all the time, and I'm like, how come they're so angry when it's cloudy? And they just are. They like a sunny day. You can inspect on a cloudy day, but they get more temperamental when it's cloudy. They're gonna start building up in late winter and the spring. I've just gotten to my hives yesterday. I just wanna see what their resources are, if they need to be fed. You can start feeding. Were you saying something else? Okay. You just want to keep an eye on them. You want to make sure they have pollen and honey. Those are their resources, their protein and their food. In the spring, I do 1 part sugar to 1 part water. It is by weight, so it's typically a gallon of water to 8 pounds of sugar. And when you first mix it, it's like, this is a lot of sugar, but that's just really what it takes, and it becomes a really heavy syrup. And you want to think in terms of gallons, not quarts, this is a really great bullet point that I didn't really think of when I first started. I would fill in like these little mason jars, and I would have a Boardman feeder at the front, and I would go out in the afternoon and be like, oh my God, it's empty already. So now I feed with 2-gallon buckets, and I just make larger batches.
So can you go back to that slide?
Sure. Oh, sorry. I think I'm going back the other way. I'm trying.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
So that's the inner cover that has a little notch in that picture, right? Is it top cover taken off of that just for demonstration purposes?
Some people just feed that way. They just have open feeders. I mean, I have a thing on top with a cover, but I think it depends on who you are and how you want to feed. Do you do it differently? Aren't yours typically out, Ryan, if you feed on top? They are in a cover.
I would do that, but I would put an empty deep around it with the outer cover on top of it.
Okay. Well, that's what I do. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Aren't there some bottom feeders too? So like the little slit where they come up, you can just turn around, and I've seen the bottom feeders. Not saying everyone feels like bottom feeders are like top feeders.
You can do that. I mean, for me, it's a Boardman feeder. It slides in there.
There's one right there.
Oh. So like this would slide into the front, and it has a place where you turn a jar upside down, but it goes so fast that quart jar will be gone in a day. You can do that. I mean, that's one way to do it. For me, my hives are in really harsh sunlight, and I don't know, they just always drip. I haven't had good luck with these, but you totally can use them. It just goes the feed goes fast. So I moved to 2-gallon buckets, and it lasts a little bit longer. You'd be surprised how quickly they'll go through sugar water.
Yeah.
Did that help answer?
Back to that, or,
Sure.
so what, underneath that, you just have some holes in the bottom of that, you have a hole in your.
There's a hole in the cover.
Your tiny little inner cover holes, all you have. Inner cover holes.
There's an inner cover hole and then holes in the bucket where they come up and pull from the bucket.
Yeah.
And then there's like a cover when you don't have a feeder on top to plug the hole. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Good. I don't myself use pollen supplements, but you can. They're many recipes online. A lot of the mentors here have recipes for pollen patties. You can supplement. You just use pollen, make it with some water, sugar, different ingredients, and you can use that to supplement their protein. And then anytime you're doing an inspection, you really want to look at the brood pattern. How does your queen look? Is she laying in a pretty uniform pattern like the top, or is it spotty brood? So if it's spotty brood and it's just sort of mixed mingled, mixed matched, doesn't really have a uniform pattern to it, your queen is probably failing. So you want to think about maybe requeening. And I mean, you're always looking, do I have a queen? Is she laying well? Do I need to replace her? And so as it gets later into the year, those queens aren't going to be available, the mated queens. So, you know, as soon as you have a problem with a queen, you want to contact a mentor or find a queen to replace her as quickly as you can. Obviously, you want to have the new queen before you get rid of the old one if you can. And then you want to take the worker bees outside of the queen cage. Anytime you're dealing with a queen in a cage and you're trying to either take the candy off the end, take the cork out where they can get to the candy, you want to be really careful. The very first time I got bees, I had 2 packages, and my mentor was with me, and I was like getting the cork out of the queen cage, and I pulled everything out, and this little bee just goes flying off, and I was like, is that bad? And she was like, yeah, that's really bad. That was the queen. So that hive didn't make it that year. So that was a very valuable lesson learned. So now if I ever have a queen cage, she's all in a tiny room with me, just being very careful. So, whoops. We kind of covered that. If you do have a new queen, typically the queen that you get is not the queen of that colony, so you're putting her in there so that just like you would if you were installing a package, and you're letting the bees get used to her. So you're putting her in the cage separately, and then it takes a few days for them to get used to her scent, and then you can let her out. Anytime the bees don't have enough nectar coming in, if it's warm enough, you want to feed. I do. And then once you have a queen in, you want to wait 5 days, and then you want to go and check if they have let her out. So if they haven't let her out at that time, you can let her out if they're not being terribly aggressive with her. Usually 5 days is enough time for them to get the scent and be okay with her. It's pretty rare. It does happen that there are 2 queens in a hive. Every now and then that would happen. I don't know what advice to give you on that. What do you do if you have 2 queens? You just decide which one and or remove her?
You mean about the cells themselves?
Well, if you were like, oh my God, there's 2 queens in here, you just take one and
We've
remove
only
her?
encountered that once.
Yeah, they'll usually sort themselves out.
Okay.
Yeah, we left them both in there.
They'll deal with it.
Well,
If you have a mother and a daughter,
It was a
that are
mother.
together,
Yeah.
and what they'll do is the daughter will fly out and mate. You'll have the mother and the daughter both laying at the same time. Then all of a sudden, the mother will just disappear.
Huh. So rare though, right? You guys have only seen it?
Only once.
Okay.
Got a video of it.
Oh, I should watch that sometime. Again, if the bees are calm, you can release her. That queen that flew off out of my first cage, it was clear they weren't having her. I mean, they immediately bowled her and just killed her. It was very sad. So you'll know, I mean, you can see that aggression. You can see if they've calmed down. So after you have let her out, you want to go, after in a few days, you want to check and make sure that she is laying eggs. If you don't see eggs, there is a problem, either with your eyesight or the queen. I have started switching to black foundation, and you see like how much easier it is to see the eggs. Well, you know. Just kidding. Oh. Yeah. I just love the black frames. I mean, the foundation. So I'm gonna move to black from now on. If you don't see eggs, contact a mentor. Again, going back to swarm management, swarming is gonna reduce the amount of honey. The larger the colony, the larger the honey crop. Swarm management really is just sort of learning how to identify what that is, and it's just kind of a judgment call. Is it too late? Is it too early? You just kind of have to feel it out. Yeah, they're gonna take most of the bees, so that's gonna be a bummer. And you can, I mean, if it's spring, somebody's probably gonna swarm. They're probably getting ready to swarm right now. So you can start looking in your inspections and see if you see those cells telling you that they might do that. When the hive starts getting congested, like we were talking about, if you're in a 10 frame box and 8 frames are solid and full of bees, it's time to add another box. And you can make splits, equalize colonies, take some frames from here, move them around, just make sure everybody looks even, balanced, well fed, has enough space. And that's just sort of something you get better with over time. You could checkerboard if all of your frames are solid and you need some room. You could empty them out with some drawn out cone and just checkerboard, do every other one. Just making sure that the queen has room to lay. What's that? All right, so making splits, you can also make splits if you see it starting to get too full. You can take some of the bees and move them over to another box. You can make a nuke. Then you give them a queen, and then you replace frames from the parent colony into that colony, and then you've got hopefully 2 hives. Again, equalizing colonies. A lot of beekeeping is just moving things around and trying to figure out what goes where to make the strongest colony. Yes?
What is the benefit of moving them into a nuke box instead of moving them into a hive, a regular size?
That's a good question. If they start small, I just feel like if you start smaller, you're gonna have a stronger place to build from than having all this extra space where they're building out comb. Those frames have already been drawn out. You're putting them in, you're kind of just having a mini colony now instead of starting a new hive where they're pulling out frames and have too much space to try to build up. Does that make sense?
I have 8 frame colonies, so I hesitate to put them in a nuke box if I'm just gonna put them in 8 frame.
Do you have guidance on that? A nuke versus splitting into either one of y'all?
So-
I'm sorry, the question is what if you have an 8 frame, why split into a nuke box versus another 8 frame box?
You got the equipment, use what you got.
Okay.
That's really one of those art questions. There's like
Okay.
100 different ways to do that. You could, I look at a colony of bees as like a box of energy. And you gotta decide how much energy do you wanna take away from that box. One strategy is, if that queen if they've got it in mind that they're gonna swarm with that queen, a lot of times I say, okay, well, I'm good, I'm giving up on that queen and I'll take her away with minimal resources, maybe 1, maybe 2 frames, so that I'm leaving the majority of the energy in the box. And they're gonna make a new queen, but I haven't given up half the population of bees. So that's one way to do it, is you take the queen away. The other way to do it is, well, you got this big box of energy with a queen that might be heading towards swarming, so let's just go take some of the energy away with eggs and larvae and go put that, whether it's an 8 frame box or a nuke box. I even use what they call a queen castle, which is a 10 frame box split into 4s that I can put 2 frames in each section of that 10 frame box, and I'll take frames out of that strong hive, and I'm trying to start 4 new hives. So I'm completely destroying the energy, but the effort is, well, I'm gonna keep the queen in the box, the old queen. So again, it's an art question. There's a lot of different ways to do it. If you call a mentor with these questions, you're gonna get all kinds of different strategies on how to do it. So you just have to decide, you've got options. There's a lot of different things you can do.
Much better answer.
Say you take some out and you put it in an 8 frame or whatever it is, do we have to supply them with a new queen? Or will they notice, hey, I don't have a queen anymore, and they're like, well, we'll hop to and make ourselves a queen?
So what you do when you pull that frame out, you want to make darn sure that it's got the youngest eggs available, because only eggs that are less than 5 days old are capable of being converted into queen cells. So what you're doing is you want to take that young egg and stick it in a new box, and the bees that go with it are going to be, oh no, we don't have a queen. They're going to convert one of those young eggs into a queen cell.
Andre?
I was just gonna encourage everyone to come to the clubs monthly, because you'll learn and be guided by these experts here, and Jen, and some of the other mentors, because today is not the last day, you know, it's a journey, and it's a learning, so, I would strongly encourage you to come to
I still learn all the time.
And we're not experts, we've just screwed up a lot. So we get to make the mistakes first. Experience screw ups. Learn from our mistakes.
I'm actually, can you speak to this slide, Bill? I don't do any of this changing, or Bobby, can you talk, you don't do it either?
I don't do it.
Basically, it's reversing. Butch talked a little bit about this the other day. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Basically, what you do is you've got a nice colony of bees. Now, if you've got just a deep and a medium, this really doesn't work, because what you have is brood in both these sections right here. Right? If this is a double deep, this is double deep, and this is a deep, most of your bees this time of year will be up in this top brood chamber. Right? So what you do, there's no place for them to go. They want to go up. They want to move out, and then they'll move down. But they don't like this. So what you do is you take the brood chamber up here and put it on the bottom, and take the bottom brood chamber and put it on top. Now, you got all your bees and brood right here, and empty comb, some extra honey, and you've got some pollen up in there. And the first thing that queen wants to do is, once she gets enough laid down here, she's gonna run up here and have tons of space to lay eggs. When you're worried about swarms, she doesn't have enough space to lay eggs. So now she runs up there, she's got 3, 4, 5 frames of drawn comb, she's got some pollen up there, she's got some honey up there. So there she goes.
Okay, cutting queen cells, you can offer them to friends before you destroy them. Every comb must be inspected. So yeah, in the spring, I look at every single frame all the time, top all the way around, and bees can have cell anywhere. So I used to just kind of glance, and now I start and I make sure I look at every corner and try to do a circle to make sure I've actually looked at the frame, because I've missed cells before. The 2 principles of supering, meaning trying to get honey. So empty, drawn comb stimulates foraging, and full supers reduce hoarding. At the beginning of the flow, add several supers of drawn comb. Add only 1 super at a time if using foundation. Wait till it's almost full before adding another. A lot of people just stack. A lot of people don't have enough equipment, so they'll let a super get full, or a few supers, and then they'll pull them out, spin them out, and put them back on. It just depends on how much.
Most new people don't have drawn comb.
Yeah, so when talking about, I mean, for me, and everyone can do whatever they want, I don't pull honey from a first-year colony. I let them pull all the wax and really kind of build up their wax. So it does take time for them to draw that out, but they'll draw it really quick. I mean, they can do pull out a 10-frame box of wax in like a week. I mean, it's crazy how quickly they can build the wax, but it does take time for them to do that. So you want to move outside frames to the middle when it's 3/4 full. It encourages the completing of the frames. When you're adding another super without foundation, exchange an empty frame with one the bees are working on to bait the super. So there's different ways to kind of get them to draw the comb and fill it out in a different way. At the end of the flow, you can crowd the bees so that they work the frames out to the corners. You really want to pull I mean, I try to make sure that the frame is completely full. Usually, some people will pull it if it's 80% capped. But you want to try to get the frame completely full of wax and honey and capped. Top supering, I mean, I just add supers to the top. Some people will pull them all up and add a super to the bottom. You can do that. It's a lot of work on your back. And I don't know that the research really shows that it's that much better. So I just throw them on top. Okay, so just other things to consider. I mean, you're always looking at your hives. You're always assessing, are they weak? Are they strong? Do they need something? Do they need food? Is there a disease? Were they poisoned? You're just really always observing for these things all the time. And you want to have your bees where there are lots of native plants around, where they can get nectar, they can get pollen, and they can bring those things back. You can plant things around your house. It doesn't mean they're going to go to those plants. I've planted many things, and I'm like, where are the bees? And they're in my neighbor's yard. So it just depends. They love dandelion. It's blooming now. I used to, try to get rid of it, and now it's just all over the yard. They love it. They're all over it. They like red maple. Blackberry, they love a tulip poplar. Privet, sourwood. Obviously, the honey from sourwood is amazing. Clover, they love clover. They love goldenrod. The honey, not so great. Some people like it. And that's it. So, any other questions? Okay. Thanks for your time.